What's going on, everybody? It is Tuesday. That means it is time for that morning after show. It's time to wrap up that fantasy week, get you set up for the new one. We're going to do it all as we always do with NFL writer Adam Hulse. Is coming up next. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. It was another fantastic week. We had a barn burner last night, as we expected to have. And what's going to be more fun is the stats that we're going to get out of this game. But the stats from the whole week were actually pretty amazing. And so, really, we're just going to get into it. Sorry about all the flip-flopping back and forth. I'm not sure really what's going on. Adam, you're here while I try to figure this out. We are going to get into last night's game, but let's talk about the weekend overall. What was kind of your impression and what, kind of got you hyped up about this weekend?
Hey man, my Cowboys won again. Of course, I'm happy about that. I went 4-2 in my fantasy leagues. Happy with that. I mean, it's the Houston Texans that are the story to me right now. They just keep proving it week after week that this isn't just like a feel-good story, like Stroud having a good rookie season, like they're going to be competitive. Like, no, this is a legitimate playoff contender. And now the storyline shifts to this week they play the Jaguars, right? A team that they have owned in recent years. If the Texans beat the Jaguars again this week, they are in first place in that division. They're no longer a wild card team. They're a division leader. So Stroud and the Texans are for real.
It's crazy. We definitely didn't call that one.
Nope. Not many did. Not many did.
Beginning of the season. But hey, you're right. They are Houston kind of in control of their own destiny as the Jaguars are struggling to figure out what is up with them. But we already alluded to it. Let's see how we're doing on the old record watch. So this week, you guys know, if you don't know, then now you should know that we went through every team in the NFL game by game. We already told you how they were going to finish, and honestly, we're not doing too bad. I went 10-4 this week. You get the edge this week. You're 11-3. The Jets Buffalo game was really the deciding factor. I expected Aaron Rodgers to be there before I made this prediction. If you go through and watch all my predictions for the week, I did predict Buffalo to win. However, on paper, before the season started, I had the Jets winning, and so you come out with the lead. You increase your lead. You are 108-55. I'm 104-60. That gives me a 63% win rate, and NFL writer Adam Hulse, of course, with the 66% win rate on the season before it ever started. And to me, that's like the cool part, is that we did this before it ever started. Hey, David, 15-2 this week in fantasy. Congratulations. I absolutely 100% did not go 15-2 in fantasy, although I did have a winning fantasy record. Welcome, David, and good morning for finally making it. Finish up the thoughts there. Home teams went 3-11 this week. It was good to be home this week. 3-11. This is the first truly absolutely dominating performance we get out of the home teams this week, and that puts them at 94-70 on the season. 57% win rate at home. 7 games were one-score games. So 50% of the games were one-score games, and 4 of those, over 50% of those one-score games, were 3 or less. And actually, I guess last night you have to add in there, I believe that was a one-score game as well. So I guess it's 8-4 when we get down to it. So I do want to talk about last night. We're going to get there, but these records, as far as the record watch, you got to be feeling good. I'm feeling good about how everything came out. And we'll kind of talk about it game by game as we do the recap in a minute. But did you think we were going to be – I ask this probably every week, but did you think we were going to be doing this good? Did you really feel like 11-3 this week?
Well, no, of course not. Like I figured with the way that we did it, with not knowing any of the variables, the injuries, who's hot and who's cold and stuff like that, I thought anything over 50% would have been good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to be winning, basically 2/3 of the picks with all the unknown variables, I think is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, we're in the 60s. You're sitting at 66%. I mean, to do that before the season started, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at that at all. So if you guys want to, see how we did, check out the YouTube channel, That Effing Sports Show. You can see how we predicted every single team this season. We broke it down for you guys. And hey, there it is. David said at the Expo, he was there at the Fantasy Football Expo with us, that Houston would be better than expected, but even David did not expect this. Houston really is the story, and we will talk more about them as we get into it, as we do a rewind of week 11. All right, Fantasy Rewind. Here we go. Let's see how it all finished up. We go through each game very quickly, or we try to make it quickly. And we kind of talk about how things went down in each game from a fantasy perspective. And then obviously we get a little of our own in there as well. But this week, Thursday night, we had Cincinnati and Baltimore. And honestly, I think people thought Cincinnati was back on track. And we get the whole controversy with the Burrow injury. Burrow not obviously really doing anything. Lamar Jackson, welcome back to QB top 10. I believe he was QB 5 this week, if I'm not mistaken. And so you get that. Joe Mixon also made the RB top 10 list. Nobody on the receiving side for Cincinnati really did anything. Odell Beckham Jr. gets himself over 15 points. Gus Edwards back on the rushing list again. Thursday night game, Adam. I mean, I'm not going to call it like a complete snoozer. Definitely a surprise, I think, that Baltimore won so dominantly. And then, of course, we lose Joe Burrow for the season.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat surprising that they won so big, but maybe not so much when you factor in that Joe Burrow out for the season gets knocked out. I mean, that changes everything, besides just what he does for the quarterback position. When that happens during the game, all the players on the Bengals know that happened too. And it affects your mental state and your confidence. And your head's only half in the game at that point and half thinking about, oh man, like I really hope Burrow's all right.
Yeah.
And those are the things that like you can't factor into the stat sheet and you can't really factor into the game, is the mental and emotional side of the game.
And the thing is the locker room, like you said, they knew this before they came out on the field. That's kind of where some of the controversy is. They already knew that Burrow wasn't, 100%. And then to have him in there, and I think that's really going to be where the criticism is. You knew he was hurt, and everybody talks about, they're supposed to be on the injury report, and yet you still played him. And I get it. I mean, you know more about it than I do, not you personally, but as a Bengals organization, they know more about it than we do. They deemed he was good to go. I mean, everybody's playing with injuries at this point in the season, highlighting Hulse's knee injury last night. And so to have your quarterback out there with an injury, I don't think that's really the controversy, but then to have it come out like this, now all of a sudden it's got to be a story.
Yeah, I mean, like that's where the gray area is, right? Because you don't have to put on the injury report everything that feels sore on every single player, because then every single player would be on every single injury report with like 6 different injuries. I mean, we're late in an NFL season. Like these players will tell you like, yeah, everything hurts right now. Like I'm not injured, but like I'm a little bit sore everywhere. My back, my legs, my shoulder, my this, my that.
Yeah.
So there's that gray area, that fine line between, feeling sore and recovering and actually being injured, which is going to be tricky for the NFL, when they do their investigation into the Bengals, to really say that they knew he was injured as opposed to just his hand was a little bit sore.
Yeah. I don't know. That's it. I mean, Burrow's gone. That's it. We've lost Mandrews. We've lost Burrow. We've lost Jones. We lost a lot of big players this season.
The quarterback injury is kind of the story of this season, right? The amount of quarterback injuries this year has been insane.
Watson's gone. You got two of the highest paid quarterbacks in the entire NFL not even playing this season. They're out. There you go. Yeah. That's what happens when you sign a contract that big.
Daniel Jones is gone. Aaron Rodgers is gone. Like it's been a crazy year for quarterback injuries.
that's the thing. It's not the little guys. No offense to the little guys,
Yeah.
if you will, but I mean we're talking. These are the big name guys. These guys are supposed to be there at the end, and there you go. As we segue into the Pittsburgh, David brings up the biggest news of the week. Bye bye, Matt Canada. Steeler fans rejoice. We cheer. We have so much to be thankful for. Steeler fans, be thankful to for the loss of Matt Canada. The final goodbye for Matt Canada. It wasn't working. We were coming out, was eking out some wins. We talked about the schedule, and Pittsburgh hasn't done so well, or has done better than they should have because of the schedule. I predicted him in double-digit wins this year because of that schedule, and we should have won this game. We did not. Pittsburgh drops in Cleveland. They dropped this game. Stat-wise, fantasy-wise, not a lot to talk about in this one except Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren back on the top 10 list, 129 and one touchdown. No one else really does anything. The highest receiver for the Steelers is Pickens with 38 yards. That's your number one receiver, 38 yards. Way to go, Steelers. Dorian Thompson-Robinson comes in for the now out for the season. Watson, he throws 160 and an interception. Doesn't even get a touchdown. Didn't need one. Jerome Ford got the only one they needed. And it's an ugly game. It wasn't a lot of fun to watch, especially if you were a Pittsburgh fan, and Cleveland comes out on top. That's really all I got to say about this one. Goodbye, Matt Canada. Thank God.
Yeah, and I mean, it had to happen. I mean, the Steelers have been outgained in every single game this season. That's never happened in NFL history this late into a season that a team has never once gained more yards than their opponent.
Yeah. I mean, good news is that everybody is still in it as we expected. I mean, Pittsburgh's still 6-4, Cleveland 7-3. That does hurt. That loss, obviously, it within the division, but everybody's still in it in this one. It's really Baltimore's to win or lose for sure. Let's see. We got Detroit and Chicago up next. Goff QB 16. Fields, welcome back to the game. Welcome back to the top 10 list, even though they take the loss. Fields finishes at QB 8 this week. Montgomery and Gibbs both hit the end zone for Detroit again, I believe. DJ Moore for 96 and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's the real deal, kids. He's the real deal. 77 and a touchdown in the top 10 again. I mean, just, and then Jamar Gibbs, if you got him, not only does he get the touchdown, he's also got 59 receiving yards. We said it would be a pretty decent game here for fantasy, and it certainly was. Detroit comes out on top as expected, but you get fantasy points all around.
Yeah, I mean, look, Detroit's just the real deal in general. Like I can fully admit that I did not buy into the hype on Detroit before the season. They were like the main team that I felt that everybody was too high on, that I was lower than most on. Apparently, I was dead wrong because they've been showing up every week. They look like a legitimate threat in the NFC conference. And if the Eagles falter at all, it might be the Lions who can sneak into that one seed in the NFC.
I'm telling you, I mean, and that's what everybody's watching for. We did talk about it, and you didn't have a lot of faith in the Lions, but we did talk about at the beginning of the season, the lack of defense throughout this entire division. That has really shown its head. Detroit did put together a decent defense for a couple weeks, and that's why they're in front, really. I mean, everybody's kind of able to score on offense. We know there's really no defense, so it's really whoever's defense kind of steps up and makes that one play by the end of the game. And so Detroit is on top. We talked about all these games that are within a score, 4 of them within 3 points. The Chargers and Green Bay game was one of them. Both teams now 4-6 after this one. Herbert still gets himself, Herbert and Love actually both end up in the QB top 10. We'll go over those stats for you later. Jalen Reed has himself a fantastic day. 46 on the ground, 46 through the air, gets himself a touchdown on the ground. Herbert, the leading rusher for the Chargers. There it is. We talked about the consensus number 1. I bring it up every year. If you're consensus number 1 RB, you don't usually finish there. Eckler ends up as RB2 on the Chargers as Herbert out rushes him 73-64. Keenan Allen still getting it done, ends up in the top 10 list again for the 5th time. Top 5, 116 and a touchdown. You are loving Allen like I am if you picked him up. Green Bay walks away with the win, and the Chargers, like you said last week, doing exactly what everyone expected. Big numbers, big fantasy stats, not many wins in the win column.
Yeah, but I mean, Chargers going to Charger, right? I mean, another close game that could have went either way. Which anytime that happens with the Chargers, they lose those games. They can't finish. They can't get it done in the fourth quarter, despite all the massive stats. Herbert in particular, with you said Keenan Allen. I mean, that guy lives in the top 10 now in fantasy. He's there every single week. It feels like. And Keenan Allen's the guy that we've talked about on this show before. That every year during draft season, he gets undervalued. Every year. People say he's getting older. He's not going to get the same target share this year. The regression is coming. And I've been hearing that about Keenan Allen for like 4 or 5 years now, and he just keeps on doing it. So
there you go. 3-time fantasy wide receiver 1. He's been in the top 10 5 times, and every time he's been top 5 or better. That's just what Keenan Allen does. Miami at Las Vegas. We said fantasy stats here. We got them. I just had a complete glitch and lost everything that I was looking at. So as we reset, we could talk about the game. Miami, Tyreek Hill finishes as wide receiver 2, just barely. Huge numbers, and he actually left the game for a little bit. So, that's what you're talking about when you get Tyreek Hill. O'Connell didn't do so bad. 271, 1 touchdown with 3 interceptions. That's really what hurt him. 2 of 325, 2 touchdowns. Obviously makes the top 10 list. Mostert, kind of a mild day for a Mostert. 86 on the ground. But he doesn't get the touchdown, and so that's kind of what holds him back. Josh Jacobs did not do what anybody wanted him to do. Devontae Adams did show up, 82 and a touchdown. We kind of knew where this one was going to go. We knew Miami was going to come out on top. You got points out of the people you were supposed to get points at, although you would have liked to got more out of Mostert. I don't know. I mean, this one went exactly how it's supposed to. I don't really know what to say about this one. Everything happened textbook.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Devontae Adams may be breaking out a little bit. He's been, for his standards, fantasy-wise, he's been pretty terrible this year.
Oh, yeah.
Due to his level. But, he had a better game this week than he's had in recent weeks, that's for sure. You hit it with the Dolphins. I mean, Tyreek Hill is going to be a top 3 wide receiver, it seems like, every single week at this point. He's basically as reliable as a receiver as McCaffrey is as a running back at this point. It's just, basically a lock to be in the top 5 as long as they get through the game.
Absolutely. The Giants go to the Commanders. We knew it was going to be a stat bonanza, not your top stats bonanzas, but we knew you would get fantasy points here. Maybe not where we thought we were going to get him. Barkley finishes as running back number 1. Welcome back to the list in the top spot. Only his second time in the list all year, but he finishes at top as it was just the Saquon Barkley show. 83 on the ground, 57 in the air, and the 2 touchdowns. Only 2 backs get multiple touchdowns this week. Barkley is one of them. His are through the air. Edwards is the other one. We'll get into that when we get you guys all statted up later on. The thing that we didn't expect here, Brian Robinson ends up back in the top 10. I kind of expected that to happen because he's got his receptions again. 73 on the ground, though, much better on the ground, but he's got his 7 receptions for 58 yards. That's always going to help when your running back is doing that. But the quarterbacks, guys, DeVito lands on the top 10 list. Sam Howell on the top 10 list yet again. Sam Howell will not leave this list. He will not leave it alone. He will not get off the top 10. He will be a top performer every week. Every single week he is there. That's his 6 out of the last 7 games. Sam Howell in the top 10. Not huge numbers, 255, 1 touchdown. Again, 3 interceptions like O'Connell, but he does enough to get himself on the list. DeVito really being the story. To me, DeVito gets on the top 10 list because nobody's got any tape on him, and it's really hard to defend against that. I don't expect him to maintain a spot like Howell has on the top 10 list, but he is there this week, and so congratulations to him.
Yeah, I mean, the Washington Commanders have the dead last ranked passing defense in the NFL. So, if DeVito was going to have a pop week, it probably would have come against a team like the Commanders.
Makes
And look,
sense.
for Sam Howell, I mean, he's having an unbelievable fantasy season, but I think we should give some credit to Eric Bieniemy, right? They hired
Yeah.
him to be the offensive coordinator, and he's not treating Sam Howell like a young developing quarterback. He's just throwing him right into the fire and saying, look, I'm going to run my full offense. I'm going to run my full playbook, and let's see how you do with it. And look, obviously the turnovers were a disaster this week for Sam Howell. That's why they lost the game, because of all the turnovers. But he's
Horrible.
been slinging it all season, and I think props have to go to the enemy on that.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has been a difference maker, and no one can really deny that at all. And what he's, what that team has been able to do with Sam Howell is absolutely unexpected. We get to the Cowboys. We stay in the division. Cowboys at Carolina. We knew the Cowboys were going to win this game. They are absolutely on fire. Dak Prescott in the top 10. Again, as far as quarterbacks, we knew that was going to happen. And Pollard had himself a game finally. If you still left him in your rosters, you were very happy. A lot of people have not. I definitely toyed with it, and I don't think I played him in every roster that I had. However, I should have, as Tony Pollard had a fantastic day. Ends up at number, sorry about that, guys. He doesn't end up quite in the top 10, but he has 61 on the ground, a touchdown, had himself a couple catches. Everybody kind of got some in this game. Schoonmaker gives himself a touchdown. Gallup got some passes. CeeDee Lamb does not finish on the top 10. That's kind of a story, as in he's been in the top 3 the last 3 weeks. He does not get in the top 10. But again, they were passing it all around. We know this Carolina defense, it's not great, but it does something to wide receivers. Even Dak Prescott only got 189 yards. That's not a lot, but his 2 touchdowns are enough to get him into the top 10. We'll talk about what it took to get into the top 10 when we get you guys statted up in a minute. Bryce Young, congratulations. 6 games in a row not making the top 10 list. 123 yards. He's got 1 trip there. He did get a touchdown, but just to even out the stat line, got an interception to go with it. Are you worried about Bryce Young at this point, or is this kind of, what you expect out of the year 1 guys? I mean, Manning did not do well in year 1. Like a lot of the greats did not do fantastic in year 1. So while Stroud excels, Young struggles, but maybe it's not such a big deal.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, that Stroud is going to make Bryce Young look worse than I think he really is. He hasn't been terrible this year when you really watch him play. He's had a couple games where he's looked better. I mean, he's a rookie quarterback. I mean, now, of course, the Panthers are kind of wishing they used that first pick on Stroud, not Bryce Young, obviously, but it's hard to judge who a quarterback is based on just their first year. It's not like the guy's throwing 4 or 5 interceptions a game. It's not like he looks completely lost in his reads on the defense. He is finding, the checkdowns. He is being safe. He's, throwing some routes pretty nicely. I mean, to me, he doesn't look like a first overall pick right now, right? But he's a developing rookie, and he hasn't shown any signs to me yet that he's a complete bust.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I think you're right. I mean, it might be a little slow, but he's learning. He's supposed to be a little slow. I don't want to steal your thunder from Dallas. Go ahead. Talk to us about these Cowboys. They're still cooking. I mean, this was a good matchup for them. We knew they were supposed to win it, and they did. But your Cowboys are looking strong, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, they took care of business this week. I mean, the game was kind of close, later in the third quarter, and I kind of shook my head and I said, don't tell me this is going to be another one of those Cardinals games, right? But then they woke up late in the game, late in the third, fourth quarter. They took care of business. They, made it look like it was a much bigger win, I think, than it was most of the game. But again, they took care of what they had to take care of. Tony Pollard, finally, his first touchdown since week 1. That's almost hard to believe with how good the Cowboys offense has been playing, that Pollard hasn't had a touchdown since week 1. Now, I thought Pollard might have actually had a bigger game than he actually did. It was good to see him get into the end zone. Before this game, CeeDee Lamb said, hey, our offense has gotten me going recently. We got Brandon Cooks going recently. Now it's Tony Pollard's turn. Watch him in this game. So I think there was a focus to get Pollard more involved, to get him that touchdown, and maybe this sparks him for a nice late run in the season.
Hopefully so. I mean, that's what Pollard owners want. But I mean, like this game, like I talked about at the beginning, they really passed it around. That's kind of what Dallas is doing. Everybody's getting involved, and when everybody gets involved, it's hard to put up big stats. Uh, with everybody getting a piece, Lamb takes a stat cut, if you will, so that everybody else can get some. Uh,
Right, and like let's
the
not forget too that they changed offensive coordinators in the off season, right? They got rid of Kellen
right,
Moore, who Dak Prescott loves Kellen Moore. They're very close. They're good friends. He's been his offensive coordinator. Dak loved the offense that Kellen Moore had. He wasn't reportedly, like angry with the decision that they got rid of Moore. He understood it, but that was a big adjustment for Dak, right? So like the
sure.
offense looked very slow and very pedestrian in the beginning of the year. Now that there's been a few weeks, all of a sudden Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback every single week now. It's clicking. He understands it. His progressions are correct. He's forcing the ball to CD Lamb like he should be doing, and everything's kind of clicking right now for the Cowboys.
We can talk about that schedule in a minute. Good morning, Jerry. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. You actually joined at a good time. We are about the halfway point for last week's fantasy results, going through the games as we do. And we're going to get you guys a little statted up here. Oh, yeah. Statted up, brought to you by, sorry, guys. Got a little ahead of ourselves there. Statted up this week, brought to you by Wake Up TSS Fantasy. Let's show them up there. Can we get them up? Thank you. Wake Up TSS Fantasy. They are there every single Sunday to get you started with your day on the Fantasy Sports Corner channel. Sunday mornings, roughly about 8:30, they get on there. I got a little piece on there. I give you the Dingus Do Not Plays of the week. It's called Dingus Plays of the Week, but they are the Do Not Plays, and I'm doing pretty darn good with those things. So I feel good about that. So thank you, Wake Up TSS, for putting all that information out. And let's get you guys a little statted up. I want to share the quarterback room. I think that's where I want to go. I want to go to the quarterback room. Let's do that. Let's get this shared up. Boom, quarterback room. We're about to talk about this game. Trevor Lawrence, unbelievable. All the problems that we've had with Trevor, and of course, I lose my slide here, is your QB1 on the week. Craziness. We get you statted up like this. We had 4 quarterbacks that went over 300 yards this week. It was 7 last week. We had Purdy, Allen, and DeVito each get 3 pass touchdowns. Of course, Trevor Lawrence had 4 total, 2 pass, 2 rush touchdowns. 4 quarterbacks had multiple interceptions this week. Howell was one of them, made the top list, but Stroud, Goff, and O'Connell all had multiple. They all had 3, I believe, and that's why they did not make the top 10 list. 5 quarterbacks got rushing touchdowns this week. Fields, of course, had his 104 rush yards. Herbert led his team in rushing, but 7 quarterback touchdowns this week. We had 4 with 5 or more sacks. DeVito got sacked 9 times, guys. 9 times. That's absolutely ridiculous. Young got sacked 7. Zach Attack and Jalen Hurts both got hit with 5, which is pretty crazy, but we saw Chris Jones just freaking go nuts last night. 2 new quarterbacks to the list, Murray and DeVito. That puts the list. Where does that put the list? I don't know, because the list is not here. We'll get you that and tell you how many quarterbacks are on that list in just a second, guys. QB1 fails to make the top 10 list for the 9th time. It's not good to finish as QB1, and this is important for fantasy because if you finish as QB1, you have not made the top 10 list the following week. Run that again. If you finish as QB1, you have not made the top 10 list the following week. That's happened 9 times, guys. Dak Prescott is the only person to repeat as QB1 all season long. T-Law had over 30 points, the only quarterback with over 30 points. And I just have to bring up the fact that Hurts had 0 pass touchdowns, and he did get sacked 5 times. That gets you statted up for the QB room. And it's a pretty interesting stat. all the way around, I think, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me there is Kyler Murray's back. Like in his
Yeah.
first game, he showed flashes of looking pretty good. He was running around, as he usually does. And now in game two, boom, right into the top 10. So he's a guy that I feel like not a lot of people are talking about because of how bad the Cardinals have been this year.
Mm-hmm.
But for a late season quarterback in fantasy lineups, Kyler Murray's potentially a guy. He might win some people some playoff games in their fantasy leagues this year.
Kyler Murray, look, he has a fantastic track record. If you look over the last 2 seasons, I think he finishes in the top 10. I know he finishes at QB 12 in a lot of categories. I mean, Kyler Murray may not make you happy. He may not get wins, but fantasy wise, he does get it done. 34 different quarterbacks have made the top 10 list this week. That's what I was trying to get to there. We will do the running back and the wide receiver room in little bit later on in the show, but I want to get back to the fantasy numbers for this week. We talked about Trevor Lawrence, of course, being QB1. I really don't know. Tennessee's supposed to have a pretty good defense. Lawrence runs two of them. ETN gets 52 on the ground. A lot of people had rush yards in this one. Calvin Ridley really is the story, though. Welcome back, Calvin Ridley. He finishes your wide receiver one. When we get you statted up later, you're going to see Calvin Ridley's name at the top of the list. 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, gets just ahead of Tank Dell. You're like, how does that happen? Tank Dell have more yards. We'll talk about that during the statted up. But on the Tennessee side, let's talk about the important stats, fantasy stats from Tennessee, and we're done. There is nothing there. DeAndre Hopkins gets 59 and a touchdown. He's your best performer of the day. Chris Moore with 38. 38 rush yards. He's also their second leading receiver with 49. If no one's really playing Tennessee people anymore, the surprise course, Derrick Henry, 10 carries for 38 measly friggin' yards. Jacksonville's defense is good. They're not that good. Tennessee's just that bad.
Yeah, I mean Tennessee's offense is really bad, like really bad. Like you hit the nail on the head with that. And look, when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, you know as well as anybody, I sang his praises all off season. I said he's an MVP candidate. I said his ceiling in fantasy football is QB1. It doesn't look like those things are going to happen this year for Trevor Lawrence, but at least for 1 week, I can say, see, Trevor Lawrence, QB1.
There you go. Jerry stealing people blind. Jerry getting to the playoffs here. Lost Burrow in a super flex league. So he grabs Hawkinson and T-Law. And he also has Laporta on his bench. Welcome to the playoffs, Jerry. That's a fantastic trade. I don't know how you pulled that off, but there you go. Good job, Jerry. Fantastic trade. Wow. I'm a little speechless on that one. That's fantastic. Anyway, yeah, Tennessee, absolute dumpster fire. Jags come away with the win, and the schedule is really going to be the thing. We talked about Houston breathing down their necks. Houston is definitely a problem for the Jags right now. This thing is not over in Jacksonville as we move into the Houston game, and we will see why. CJ Stroud, he gets the 3 interceptions, so he misses, a big impact on the list. On the top 10 list, he finishes at QB 13, but for 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the win, I don't think he's feeling too bad about it. Devin Singletary shows out again. I believe he was the number 1 DFS running back play this week. I definitely played him. 112 yards and a touchdown. Singletary just killing it right now. And it's nice to see Houston get a run game. On the Arizona side, well, let's not forget. We already talked about it. Tank Dell, 149 yards and a touchdown. I almost played him in DFS and I didn't do it, and that's why I didn't make any money this week. Tank Dell, 149 a touchdown. Nico Collins still got 65. Houston just firing on all cylinders. Arizona really shouldn't feel absolutely horrible. Their season was really already done anyway. They're kind of looking at a good draft pick. So let's find some positives. Hey, Kyler Murray's back. He makes the top 10 list. I believe he came in at number 6 or number 8. Number 8, I believe. But he is their number 6. Kyler Murray, number 6. And that's really the story. I mean, he passes the ball around. Dortch with 76. Rondell Moore gets himself a tutty with 48 yards. McBride with 43. Wanted more out of McBride, but it's the tight end position, so don't expect a lot no matter who you're playing, unless you're playing Kittle or Kelsey. Hawkinson, I'll throw him in there too. Arizona, they're looking better. Just nothing for Houston at this point in the season, as Houston's really got it figured out right now.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good game, too. Like, that was a very competitive game to the end. That's so funny that you mentioned Tank Dell in DFS because I had him in my lineup for DFS all week long as, like, one of the staples that I was kind of, like, building the DFS lineup
We know
around.
this story.
And Sunday morning, you got to tweak on Sunday mornings, right? You got to tinker a little bit. You got to tweak a little bit. And for whatever reason, I pivoted off of Tank Dell, who was like, again, one of my building blocks from the start, one of the first guys I plugged into my lineup before building the rest around it. And yeah, that one definitely came back to bite me too.
Look, I'm going to give you guys some fantasy advice, and this one should be plastered everywhere. Don't touch your rosters on Sundays unless you got injuries. I'm telling you, every single time I do it, it backfires. I have never once made the right call on a Sunday. I always make the right call beforehand. Don't mess with your rosters on a Sunday.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
San Francisco and Tampa Bay. Tampa in San Francisco. Really not a bad game. We expected San Francisco to win as they did. Mayfield didn't look horrible. I think that's the talk that I heard a lot this week. You're going to see Mayfield look, fairly decent. He's not going to, be horrible. He's not going to beat the 49ers, and they sure didn't. Rashad White back down to earth, 30 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Mike Evans looked really good, putting up his 43 yards and a touchdown. Does get above 15 points yet again this season, one of the top people to do it all year. Christian McCaffrey, 78. Again, no touchdown rushing. He did get the pass touchdown, so McCaffrey back on the touchdown board and did well, finished in number 4, I believe, running back 4 on the week. Brock Purdy, of course, as QB2, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 333. It was the day of threes for Brock Purdy. Does fantastic. Just really kind of puts on a clinic. Brandon Ayuk had the matchup, 156 and a touchdown. Kittle with 89 and a touchdown. Even Debo put up 63. He got you 9 points if you had to play him, and that's probably the only way you did play him. But you weren't horribly mad about it because you got 9 points on an offense with Ayuk getting 156 and a touchdown and Kittle getting 89 and a touchdown. San Francisco did what they were supposed to do. Tampa lost, didn't look horrible doing it, and that's the San Francisco game, guys.
Hey, look, I mean, everything I said about Keenan Allen before, you can say the same thing about Mike Evans, right? Every year during draft season, he gets undervalued. You draft him, and he ends up being the best wide receiver on your roster when you took him to be like your wide receiver 2 was like a mid-round type of pick. He outperforms his ADP, it feels like, every single season. Now, when it comes to the Niners, Brandon Ayuk just keeps balling. And he's a guy that I talked about before the season that I believed he was going to surpass Deebo Samuel this year as the number 1 target in that passing game. And he definitely has. He's been lighting it up every week. And I mean, Deebo really hasn't done a whole lot this year. It's been all Ayuk in the passing game. And then Kittle's been his usual boomer bust. He's either a top 3 tight end or he does nothing. That's kind of been the Kittle story over the last couple of years. Brock Purdy, maybe the best game of his career. When you go by his passer rating, his quarterback rating, it was the best game of his career. Perfect QB rating for Brock Purdy. First Niner to do it since Joe Montana.
Yeah, I think they said it happened since Joe Montana. You're absolutely right. First Niner to do it. And it was an impressive one. So, you can have a perfect QB rating. You go 14 for 14 and 200 yards, you get yourself a perfect QB. He went 333 and 3 touchdowns, on 21 for 25, 84% passer rating. Obviously number 1 on the day for starters, because we're not counting Davis Mills 1 for 1. But he just blew everybody out of the water. Lawrence finishes as QB1 because he has that 4th touchdown, but Brock Purdy really the QB of the day as far as I'm concerned. Jets and Bills. I told you about wake up TSS. I told you I got a little thing on there, a little segment called the Dingus, Chris Fox's Dingus Picks of the Week, and I tell you who not to play. I've never done a defense. I usually don't talk about defenses or tight ends. I usually stick to the main positions. For the first time ever, I did a defense. I said, do not play the Jets defense. Nobody has more top 10 finishes this year than Josh Allen except Jalen Hurts. All right, now that number, they are actually tied. So I understand that Josh is trying to win games and he's throwing interceptions. I understand that the Jets defense has been playing lights out. They do very well, but statistically, or excuse me, from a fantasy aspect, the Jets defense does not get points. Single digits. I think it's 4 out of the last 5 weeks. Now count this one. They only got 2 points. The Bills can play. When they lose, they kill themselves like they did last week. This week, they came out, they showed out. Josh Allen, 275, 3 touchdowns, has himself the interception. You know, Dak Prescott-ish from last year. James Cook actually puts up 73 on the ground, which I did not expect to happen. Khalil Shakir shows up again, 115 yards and a touchdown against this Jets defense. That was unexpected. Ty Johnson, James Cook, they also get receiving touchdowns. Again, 3 receiving touchdowns against this Jets defense. And honestly, the Jets team that you expect to get every week, that's the one that actually showed up. Breece Hall, 23 yards rushing. Zach Wilson, 81 yards passing. They ran 3 quarterbacks in this one. That's how bad it got. Wilson and Boyle both get interception. Morstead even got a pass in there. Breece Hall did have 50 and 1 receiving because of one nice big chunk play, which was pretty nice. But other than that, the top, even Breece Hall only has 50 yards, and the next guy's got 25. The Jets got beat down by the Buffalo Bills, 32-6. And from a fantasy aspect, the Bills were the ones you definitely wanted to have.
Well, it's good to see that from the Bills because this was an absolute, no doubt about it, must-win game for the Bills. If 100%. They lost this game, their chances of making the playoffs.
Yeah, they were real bad.
Especially considering the very difficult schedule that they got coming up. They got to play the Eagles next. They still got to play the Chiefs. They still got to play the Cowboys. But you mentioned it before, like with the Bills, with how they've looked kind of week from week to week. And this season for the Bills has really been the Bills against the Bills. In the weeks where they come out and look good, they're dominating, they're winning games, they're putting up points like they just did against a very good Jets defense, like they did against Miami a few weeks back, right? But then they have these weeks where they just come out and look absolutely terrible, you know? Like, it's not like those games that they're showing up and getting edged out at the end, you know? Like, they're not the Chargers, you know? Like, they're not playing well and not finding ways to win at the end of the game. It's when they show up, they win, but they just don't show up every week.
It's crazy to see this happen with the Bills. And, you know, we talk about the Burrow injury, and you expect Cincinnati to not be there now. The Bills are struggling. You know, Kansas City looks good to be there. Philadelphia looks good to be there. The Jacksonville with Houston breathing down their neck. You know, you talk about the teams that were there last year versus the teams that were going to be here this year. We'll talk about that in the Pulse Check coming up in just a few minutes. Rams and Seahawks, got yourself a game. These two teams are kind of on the same level. I kind of expect this to happen in the games. Adam was playing paddleball, I think. And Geno Smith goes for 233 and a touchdown. Zach Charbonnet, he's going to be number 1 running back pickup this week. 100%. Everybody's going to be going after Charbonnet. 47 on the ground and 22 through the air on 6 receptions. He makes the top 10 list. We're going to get you guys statted up on the running backs in just a game. And DK Metcalf, welcome to the top 10 list. First time all season, 94 and a touchdown. Puka Nacua, welcome back to the top 10 list, 70 and a touchdown. And Matthew Stafford is Matthew Stafford, 190, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But he gets the win. He's good enough for the win, and that's not going to help the Seahawks' chances being in the division like that. But it's a 1-point game, and Seahawks got to win these games.
Look, I mean, if I was a Seahawks fan, I'd be very worried right now. And it's not just the Geno Smith injury. We don't know if he's going to be okay or not, or the Kenneth Walker injury, like you just referenced with. But even the games they've won this year, they have not looked very good doing it. Like they've been winning, some Pete Carroll grinded out kind of games and like kind of finding a way in the end to kick the game winning field goal or where like whatever it may be. They had the
Mhm.
chance to do so again here and he missed that kick. But week to week now, their offense looks lost. Their offense has not looked good at all this year. Very pedestrian. Their defense has been pretty good. But a team that me and you were both very high on before this season in the Seahawks, because of how much we liked just the construction of their roster, they just have not looked impressive to me at all.
And that's the thing. There's supposed to be so much talent on this team, and I think there is so much talent on this team. Excuse me. I don't know if it's just they're not focusing. Because I think when you have that much talent, you still have to focus all that somewhere. You look at most teams; they have a clear cut wide receiver one. They have a clear cut RB, at least a two back committee. And I would say they probably have a two back committee here, but they don't have a clear cut wide receiver one. I mean, if you said who's the wide receiver one of the Seahawks, you'd probably say DK Metcalf, but yet the stats every week, it's Lockett, Metcalf, Lockett, Metcalf. Oh, here's JSN, Lockett, Metcalf. And I think you need to have that focus. And I think with a team with this much talent, maybe that's the issue in Seattle. Defense is doing well, but again, they could be doing better. It is their first year for a lot of these guys, but you're absolutely right. We expect more from the Seahawks. The Seahawks should be doing more. I'm not the guy to say what the problem is, but that's my theory. Is maybe they're just not focused on one specific area. I think that might help. I don't know. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a chemistry thing. It could be, look, maybe the team doesn't believe in Geno Smith. Like if
Maybe.
you don't really believe in your quarterback, right? Like that's a mental thing also, which we referenced early on in the show. Like if you're doubting your ability to win, and a lot of that is going to stem from who's playing your quarterback, right? Use like the ultimate example of the Chiefs, right? No matter what the score is on the scoreboard, every player on the Chiefs believes they still have a chance to win because Patrick Mahomes is playing quarterback. Obviously,
Absolutely.
Tom Brady made his whole career doing that. The comeback wins, and the team fights every second of every play because they're like, as long as we give our quarterback a chance, he's going to win this one for us. Maybe the
Absolutely.
Seahawks don't feel that way about Geno Smith. And look, I mean, he has not been very good this year. Last year was kind of the anomaly. He's never been a good quarterback for his entire career. He's been basically a career backup for a reason. He exploded out of nowhere last year, but he's come back down to earth.
We're going to get you guys statted up in the running back room. Regression, the word in Seattle. The last game on Sunday was the night game. Minnesota, Denver Broncos. Denver comes out with the win. But Josh Dobbs still makes the list. Josh Dobbs is there. 221, a touchdown, an interception, 21 rushing yards, and runs one in. That's what got him there. Alexander Madison with 81, which was a little surprising that Alexander Madison had more carries and more yards. Everybody kind of looking at Ty Chandler. Madison was supposed to be injured. Ty Chandler still did good, 10 for 73, 175 yards rushing for Minnesota. You kind of expecting a little more, but Denver, we talked about this. Denver's kind of getting it dialed in. Denver's kind of the team to watch right now. Hawkinson, 55, but no touchdown. We talk about your tight ends. They're boomer bust every week if you don't have Kittle or Kelsey. Russell Wilson goes 259 and a touchdown. This is the important part. No interceptions for Russ. That is a big one. Javonte Williams is your leading rusher with 37. Said not to play him this week on the Dingus picks. There he is. Cortland Sutton, 66 and a touchdown, makes your top 10 list again. And Sam J. Pirine, 7 receptions for 60. Nobody called that. Nobody played him for that. But, again, Denver starting to kind of utilize all the weapons there, and they squeak out this one 21-20. Go Denver.
Yeah, I mean, Pirine, it felt like all of those receptions came on that one drive late in the fourth quarter, right? Like it was just check down to Pirine pretty much every play. Now, with Russell Wilson, it's a lot like what I just talked about with Dak Prescott in a way, right? With the adjusting to the new offensive system. The Broncos, the beginning of this year, they kind of looked, Russell in particular, is the same that they did last year. But now that he's adjusted to this new way of doing things, that Sean Payton wants to run offense. Sean Payton, again, think about what you want of him on a personal level, of what you think of him as a person. That's all fine. But you can't take away the fact that this guy is an offensive genius. The way this guy designed offenses, it works. He has a system that works. It wasn't just Drew Brees carrying Sean Payton. Let's remember, too, that he made Jameis Winston look like a superstar quarterback after Drew Brees left. So now that Russell's really understanding all the nuances, also the other big change with the Broncos is they have fully committed to running the ball. They are running the ball more.
They're not letting it
That's
go.
something Sean Payton, let's not forget too, it's always about Drew Brees and the passing. Sean Payton loves to run the ball. He runs the ball a whole lot in that system, which opens up all those throwing lanes for his quarterbacks. It's clicking for Russell right now. He's not turning the ball over. Look, he's not putting up, 300 yards a game or anything like that, but he's playing the system the way it's supposed to be played, and he's not making the mistakes that have killed him like last year. Now, on the other end, you mentioned the Chandler Madison thing. I didn't think Madison was going to play. Like, I was all over Ty Chandler this week too. He didn't clear the concussion protocols till pretty late. It didn't sound like he was going to play. Then all of a sudden he did play. But this is just another reminder that it doesn't matter who's playing running back. Anybody can run the ball against the Broncos. So, like, if you're like, need running backs, just figure out who the Broncos are playing against. Use those running backs. DFS, play running backs against the Broncos because everybody's done it to them all year.
Yeah, you can usually get a value there. The Broncos are on a 4-game win streak. They got the Browns up next, so we're going to find out if they can beat defenses or if they're just winning on offense. We're going to get the real story.
Good luck stopping that rushing game. Yeah, play forward, play hunt, DFS, go for
it. We got Gorilla Kid. Christmas came early. God knows it's been time 2 years ago. All I want is for the organization to get somebody out of the house. Next man up stuff. Go Steelers. Excuse me, referencing the Matt Canada loss, I'm sure. Let's get you guys statted up in the running back room. I'm not going to run the trailer again, but this statted up is brought to you by our friends over at Toilets to Trophies. These guys are great. I've worked with, I met these guys at the expo, did an interview with them. They run these amazing leagues, kind of like Elite Fantasy Games, very Elite Fantasy Games-esque in the fact that there's lots of little twists, lots of little of nuances in there, different things happening every week to keep you involved, a lot of strategy involved. They've got all the great shows over there on the Toilets to Trophies channel. Let me get this here if I can, if it wants to work. If it doesn't, maybe it doesn't. Over Toilets to Trophies, go check them out. They've got shows, they've got analytics, they've got draft day advice, waiver wire advice, and the great thing is you can go on the Gilded app and get in their chat room. There are a ton of amazing fantasy minds in this Gilded app. I joined over there myself, and there are just tons of fantasy advice, tons of fantasy things going on, tons of places to talk about it. Go over to the Gilded app, contact them at toilets2titles.com. You can message them. They will get you on that Gilded app. If you need the information, you can message me at that effing show on Twitter or Instagram. I can get you the information as well. The Toilets to Trophies Network, new partners here, and they are fantastic. Go check them out. Let's get you guys statted up in the RB room. Saquon Barkley. We talked about it. There he is, friends. Saquon Barkley is in the house at number 1. Third time on the list. First time as running back number 1. Jaylen Warren is also there. I'll let you guys kind of read the list. Let me take down the phone number. You guys can call in. There is the list. Let me get you guys statted up in the RB room. 44 different running backs so far have made the list. No new running backs this week. However, this week, only 2 running backs get over 100 yards. 6 last week, only 2 go over 100 yards this week. At plus Fields, it was Warren and Singletary that actually got over 100 yards. Barkley didn't even get over 100 yards. Both those running backs are in the top 10, by the way. 11 running backs had a touchdown run, 16 last week. 10 different teams, 11 running backs, 10 different teams because Monty and Gibbs for the Lions both had run touchdowns. 5 of those 11 were in the top 10. 7 running backs had a receiving touchdown. Look, I'm telling you, if you got a running back who can catch the ball, you got yourself a fantasy player right there. 4 of those top 7 were in the top 10. All right. You got to have a running back catch the ball nowadays. 2 had more than 1 touchdown. So everybody only gets 1, except for Barkley and Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards back in the top 10. Gus Edwards balling out right now for Baltimore. If you got him, play him because he's doing great. Running back 1 from the previous week has not made the list for the 3rd time. That's okay, or it has made the list for only the 3rd time. All the other weeks, just like the quarterback room, if you finish as number 1, you usually don't make the list. This time, they did make the list, of course, because we know B-Rob was the RB1 last week. He finishes down there at number 7 this week. Those receptions, 7 receptions, you're in PPR, it works. Warren had the highest yards per average at 14.3. 14.3 a carry, that's nasty. Singletary and Mostert had the most attempts at 22. Only 20, that's the top. That's the most attempts any running back got is 22. We're used to seeing 30s and high 20s and stuff. Only 22. B-Rob and P. Ryan had their 7 receptions, and 14 running backs made it over the 15 points. We talk about that 15-point threshold kind of really being where you need fantasy players to be to make the list, to make an impact. 14 all told made the list this week. We are with Adam Hulse as always. Adam, make you a little bit smaller there. That is your Statted Up Stats brought to you by Toilets to Trophies for week 11. We got one more game to talk about. Adam, any of those stats surprising to you?
Well, I mean, Devin Singletary 2 weeks in a row now looking very good. I mean, Dameon Pierce, I guess, is a guy we can all forget about Dameon Pierce at this point. Like he flashed some good last year, but yeah, like he needs to be unrostered, ignored. He's fantasy irrelevant at this point. Brian Robinson, he was a guy I had all over my DFS lineups this week.
Yeah.
With the performance he came off last week, with playing against the Giants this week, and with no Antonio Gibson, meaning he would probably be used a little bit more as a passer than usual. Robinson was one of my favorite DFS plays this week, and that kind of worked out.
Yeah, I looked down and I said, nah, you ain't going to do 2 weeks in a row. I was wrong. Last night, we got our Super Bowl matchup, our rematch. We got the exact same game. To me, it was pretty much the exact same game that we got in the Super Bowl. It was just flipped. Kansas City had all the momentum in the first half. Second half comes out. Philadelphia starts chipping away. By the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth, they've got the momentum, and they rode it all the way in. Mahomes, I saw a lot of overpasses. The story of the night, of course, are the drop balls, 26 drop passes for the Kansas City Chiefs this season, and I swear like half of them happened last night, and the most important ones, of course, on the final drive. MVS drops just an absolutely unforgivable go-ahead score on the final drive there. And Watson, who had such a great game, I say it every time it happens. My wife gets on me because I do it, but every time it's like, sorry, guys, sorry I hit you in the hands. I mean, you're just wide receiver. Sorry I hit you in the hands with a football. That's what Mahomes did with MVS. That's exactly where he hit Watson, and they just couldn't get it done, and so they walk away with the loss. Patrick Mahomes does not make the top 10 list, as you can imagine. 177 passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 38 on the ground. Isaiah Pacheco looked good, not good enough for the running back top 10, but 19 carries for 89. Justin Watson, the story, still only 53 yards, but came up with some big catches. Kelsey had some big drops. And of course, Watson ruins all his positive accolades with the drop on the final play of the game. Jalen Hurts finishes at QB 11, just outside, but he only had 150 and 0 touchdowns. I brought that up during the QB stats. 0 passing touchdowns for Hurts. He did have 2 rushing touchdowns, and that's why he finishes at QB 11 on 29 yards. DeAndre Swift, he was kind of the story for the Eagles. 76 yards on 12 carries and the touchdown, kind of a resurgence there. DeAndre Swift getting back into the rhythm. Devonta Smith, I knew Devonta was going to have a big game. I wish he would have had a touchdown. 6 for 99. DeAndre Swift also had 3 receptions. A.J. Brown, the other story, only 1 catch for 8 yards. Kansas City's defense is playing better than anybody thinks they are, and Chris Jones is an absolute reckoning for anybody that goes against him. We talked about Jalen Hurts taking 5 sacks. That's what I got for you stat-wise on last night's game.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not, as high scoring as some people thought that it was going to be. Not super surprising to me, especially with the way that the Chiefs defense has played this year. But man, it is not often that you see Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid blow a double-digit lead in the second half. They were up 17-7 in the second half of that game. That's not something you see every day. Also, I saw something crazy that like Mahomes has only lost 1 regular season game in his career in November or later, which is unbelievable. The way he turns it on like towards, the end of seasons and, rolls into form, of course, right in time for the postseason. But, with Mahomes, with this guy being the ultimate leader, like obviously MBS should have caught that touchdown pass.
100%. Unforgivable.
Justin Watson should have caught that 4th down, 1st down pass, right? Both of those passes should have been caught. But what does Mahomes say after the game? After the game, he said, look, MBS was wide open. I should have threw the ball a little bit shorter. If I threw it a little bit shorter, he probably would have came down with it. Never once would have said, man, he should have caught that ball. He said, it's on me. I overthrew him a little bit. He did not overthrow him a little bit. That was a perfectly placed ball.
It landed right in his hand.
Yeah, right. But that's what a leader like Mahomes is going to do. Yeah, I should have threw it just a little bit shorter and he would have caught it. I mean, come on now.
That's why the entire team has his back no matter what. No matter what
exactly.
happens, they have his back every time.
He'll never point a finger. He'll never put the blame. He'll say, if we lose, it's on me. If he didn't catch that ball, I should have threw it better. And that is how you achieve greatness.
And that's why he's arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, and I think he is the best quarterback in the NFL all around. I don't know
easily
too far of a tangent, but we'll see we could see these two again. We could see these two again in a championship game. We could see this as a Super Bowl rematch. Maybe we won't see them till next year. I don't know, but we got another fantastic game out of these two teams. Got exactly what we wanted. Like I said, to me, it was just the exact opposite of last year's Super Bowl. They just kind of switched roles in this one. Mahomes had a leg injury. Hurts had a leg injury. People stepping up that necessarily hadn't been there all year. Tony in the Super Bowl. We see Devontae Smith step up in this one, and Swift as well. It really just reminded me of the Super Bowl all over again. It was just played out on other sides. All right, guys, that gets you through this week. That gets us through week 11, so we can start getting into week 12. To get warmed up to do that, we like to let Adam kind of tell us how the NFL is going. We like to get a pulse on the NFL. We do that with Adam Hulse. Pulse with Hulse, brought to you by none other than Adam Hulse. Adam Hulse over there at Adam Hulse Sports. You can find all his stuff on Sportskeeda. He is an NFL writer at sportskeeda.com. Go to sportskeeda.com, put /Adam Hulse. You'll find all his articles. He pumps out multiple articles every week, and I'm telling you, every single one will increase your football knowledge and help you win fantasy games. Go over there. You can talk to him directly at Adam Hulse Sports on Twitter. Ask him a question. Let him know what he thinks. He'll give you an answer, and you will be better for it. The Pulse with Hulse, brought to you by the man himself, Adam Hulse. Adam, couple questions for you as we kind of get the pulse of the NFL. I want to go back to the Seahawks, and not just the Seahawks, but the Seahawks I still kind of consider one of the top teams for making the playoffs. We talked about Cincinnati with Burrow out. Look, going to be tough. Houston breathing down the Jaguars' necks. Philly and KC look good to be there. Give me the pulse of the NFL on last year's playoff teams versus who they might be getting replaced with this year.
Yeah, and I mean, like this is something that I love about the NFL, and it's you never get the same teams in the playoffs every season. Like when one year ends during the off season, you always kind of feel like, oh well, they'll be back and they'll be back and they're really good,
That's what I
so
was going
they'll
to
be
say. You
back.
always expect to get the same teams, though.
It never works. It always feels that way. It never works out that way. You know what I mean? Now, when you look at the NFC versus the NFC to me right now looks very top heavy. There's four teams: the Eagles, the Niners, the Cowboys, the Lions. Those
hmm
four teams have really solidified themselves as the elite class of the NFC right now. After that, it's tough, man. Like a team like the Vikings is kind of in control of their wild card spot. To me, the Vikings don't really look like a true playoff team. That's not a team I'd be worried about in the postseason. Somebody
hmm
has to win the NFC South, right? Somebody's got to win it.
Right
Is
now,
it
it's
going
the
to be the
Saints with
Saints? Is it going to
five
be the
measly
Bucks? Is it going
wins.
to be
Yeah.
the Falcons? Whoever it is that gets in, they're probably at this point looks like they're going to be hosting the Cowboys in the first round of that playoffs if the Cowboys hold on to that top wild card and unless Philly kind of falters. Now the AFC is where things really get interesting. When you look at the AFC, there are 14 teams still alive in the
Yeah.
AFC fighting for 7 spots. That is a fun race over there. And look, I talked about it earlier in the show. The Texans are no longer a feel good story. They are a true playoff contender at this point. Now, I'm not saying they're going to make a deep run. I'm not saying that they're, possibly going to the Super Bowl or anything like that. But right now, if the season ended today, they own one of those wild card spots. If they win this upcoming week, they're now a division leader. They are in the driver's seat for their destiny right now. And the way that they have played, it doesn't look like that's going backwards anytime soon. And it's the simple fact that when you got the quarterback and you have a coach, which D'Amico Ryans looks like he's going to be a pretty good coach with what he's done with this team in such a short amount of time, great things happen, right? Unless you're the Chargers, of course, because, they might not have the coach, but they obviously got the quarterback. They have the roster, they have the talent, but great things don't happen for the Chargers. There's a team again that, once again, another disappointing season. They made the playoffs last year. To me, they're not making the playoffs this year. They're just
hmm
not going to get there. Like, I think they're going to run out of time. That's a team that got there last year that I don't think is going to get back. And yeah, there's just too many good teams in the AFC right now for a team like the Chargers to be able to claw their way back into contention.
Yeah. You talk about the top heaviness. Look, when you draw the line at who's in and who's out, as if the playoffs were to start today, Minnesota, excuse me, guys. Minnesota is in that last seventh spot, and they have a two
Yeah.
game lead on the next team, which is Green Bay. So there's a two games of separation. Still a lot of season to go, but you talk about that top heaviness, whereas in the AFC, nobody is more than one game than the next guy. And I mean, Baltimore has 8, Kansas City has 7. There's some sevens, and then it goes to 6, and then there's a group with 5, and then there's a group of 4, and there's a group of 3. Like it's tiered appropriately, if you will. Talk about Houston. They're sitting at number 6 right now. They got the tiebreaker on Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is still in. 6 is the number right now, as of today, to get in on either side of football in either division. 6 is in. Anything less is not. Still some time to go. There's going to be matchups. Some of these teams are going to switch places and move around, but you're right. It seems like that's more likely to happen in the AFC than it is the NFC. Only 3 teams even have three division leaders have. Well, it's not even the division leader. Actually, no division leader. There's 3 division leaders that have a 2 game gap, and that's Kansas City, Philly, and Detroit. Detroit actually is another division leader with a 2 game gap. Everyone else only has a 1 game gap, 1 game lead on the other people in there. So this could definitely switch up very easily. Playoffs are looking very exciting right now. 12 weeks in. QB injuries. You brought it up earlier. We've lost Mahomes, we've lost Jones, we've lost Watson. One of those is really important. 2 of those are important to their team. Who are we going to lose next? Not that you could actually predict that, but how many more are we going to lose? Like you brought up, it seems like QBs are dropping like flies. We brought up how everybody's playing hurt. Hurts is hurt. Almost every significant QB at the top tier level, they're all playing with injuries right now. And that's expected in a lot of positions, but I don't know if we see it so much in the QB position as we are this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been a historic year for quarterback injuries. Like, I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but I think, to this point of the season, with how many different quarterbacks have missed games with injuries, as well as how many different quarterbacks have started a game this year, I think we're hitting historic numbers on that. And it's an unfortunate thing to see, right? This league is obviously built around the quarterbacks, right? They're the superstars, they're the faces of the franchise. So, like, when you're not getting the best ones out there every week, like for me, Joe Burrow, right? Right now, the Bengals are out of the playoffs. Without Burrow,
Oh, yeah.
there's going to be a playoffs without the Bengals. By the way, there might be a playoffs without the Bills and the Bengals, two teams that we all had as absolute locks to get back there this year, right? But for Joe Burrow, for me, like without Joe Burrow, I wanted to see the Bengals in these last few games, see if Joe Burrow could catch fire and propel the Bengals back into the playoffs after being out. We all know Joe Burrow in his career so far has been better late in seasons than early in seasons. He's traditionally a slower starter that gets things going later. So that was one of the storylines I was most excited to see is can Burrow get the Bengals back into the playoffs when right now they're out and he's running at a time? We don't get to see that anymore because now it's Jake Browning, or if they go with, a free agent or whatever it is that they decide to do, that like the Bengals to me are no longer an interesting team. They're irrelevant at this point. Like without Burrow, whether they make the playoffs or not, their year is over without Burrow. Like they're not doing anything there. So like all these quarterback injuries, very unfortunate, and it really changes the entire landscape of the NFL, the storylines, and not just what teams are competitive, but like what you'd be looking forward to during this final stretch of the season.
It's really amazing. It's like you said, it's the impact. That's really the deal right there. It's the impact. Um, it's crazy. You talk about the Bills. The Bills got the Eagles, Chiefs, and Cowboys next. That's if they walk out of
Yep.
there with even one win. I mean, they could go 3-3 over the next 6 games. They got the Chargers, Patriots, and Dolphins for their final three, so that might save them. But I don't know if they lose all
Maybe.
three to the
Yeah.
Eagles, Chiefs, and Cowboys. Luckily, none of those games are divisional games, and so it's going to depend on how Miami does. It's going to depend on how the Jets do. Not that we really expect the Jets to make a run, but it's the schedule is what we're talking about here. So
That the
yeah, I mean,
Bills are trying to hang on to a playoff spot. They're not in right now. They're on
yeah,
the outside looking in, and they have this brutal stretch of games in front of them. Like that's a very, very difficult spot to be in for the Bills. Like if they were already in and they had this tough schedule and they just had to try to hang on to this spot despite this difficult road, but they don't just need to survive this difficult road. They have to thrive through it. They can't go 1-2 in their next three games of these three difficult games. They're going
yeah.
to basically be out of it if that happens. They got to win at least two of these three games, and considering the opponents, that's going to be challenging. Not that
The
they
good
can't
news,
do it. This was a Super Bowl contender when the year started. And as we mentioned before, when the Bills look good this year, they look really good. When they look bad, they look really bad. So they need
yeah.
the good Bills to show up down the stretch, or they're not going to be playing in the playoffs this year.
Maybe they'll be one of these teams that plays at the level of their opponents. I don't know. Stephon Diggs for the good news. Stephon Diggs is wide receiver number 4. And of course, Josh Allen is QB1. Where is he QB1? Well, pretty much everywhere. He's QB1 in yards. He's QB1 in touchdowns. He's QB2 in rushing touchdowns. Unfortunately, he's also QB1 in interceptions, and that's really kind of what's been holding him back. But when your defense has been a little loosey goosey and you got to be out there and got to be the guy to win the game, you're going to have some interceptions. I mean, up there in the interceptions category, of course, Sam Howell is in there, but Jalen Hurts has 9. Patrick Mahomes has 9. Tua's got 8. Goff has 8. So, he's got a couple more than those guys, but I mean, the guys that are trying to win games are going to have interceptions. We've been saying that all year. Lastly, real quick, as we get the pulse with Hulse, what do you think about this here? I want to get your interpretation. We talked about fantasy relevance. 15 kind of being the number based on how many hit 15. Running backs, we get about 14 running backs every week, somewhere between 12 and 14. So if you're talking a 10-person league, 32 per, a 10-person league, you got yourself 20 running backs getting started every week on average. So 14 making 15 points. That's where you want to be. 7 of them above 20. With the wide receivers, however, we got 20 wide receivers that get above 15, 10 that get above 20. We've got more stats on that, and I'll put those out, in separate increments, not as a part of the show. But we talk about these top 10 lists. We get honed in on these top 10 lists, but then we mention the fact that a QB has only even made the top 10 list after being number one like 2 times all season. The running backs have done it 3 times all season. Wide receivers are 50-50. So why is there such a difference? Why is there so much back and forth and up and down? Usually you've got these wide receivers, and to be fair, the wide receivers are doing it more than anybody, but you've got your positional players that finish the top every single week. You've got your top QBs every single week. You've got your top running backs every single week. We don't have that this year. What's going on, Adam?
Well, for me, like, I think a lot of it has to do with, like, we've seen a resurgence in defense this year, right? Like, the last few seasons have been all about the high flying offenses and the high scoring teams and this and that. Like, when you look at a lot of the teams this season that are considered like the top class of NFL team, it's been about the defense more so than it's been about the offense, which I think is an interesting shift. It's kind of like, these offensive coordinators that designed all this stuff, the defensive coordinators have now caught up to it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of that chess match that goes back and forth in the NFL. And now I think the focus for a lot of offenses, rather than forcing it to certain players, they're kind of more taking what the defense gives you, right? Like if you're going to play 2 deep safeties or 3 deep zones, they're just going to hand it off to the running back and they're going to take their 4 or 5 yards, right? Because then you're putting yourself in better manageable type of situations. And we've seen these offenses now spread the ball around a lot more, right? With the exception of like a few, like your Tyreek Hills and Justin Jeffersons and Christian McCaffrey, right? Like your very, very few rare class. There's been more of a focus on let's spread it around to everybody. Let's keep the defense guessing. They don't know where I'm going with the ball. Like let's be less predictable in that instead of targeting the same guy 15 times a game, maybe reduce that to 10 and make those other 5 go somewhere else. So I think that has a lot to do with the way that, these standings have kind of been inconsistent all year with who's been at the top of these lists, as well as just the average scores in general being down this year. There's been a lot less people going off for 20, 30 points in a game than it's felt like over the last couple of years. And it's all relative. You know what I mean? Like if 15 is kind of that median line, then 25 points is a great game. It doesn't necessarily have to be that 30, 35 if everybody else is scoring less as well. It's just been a completely different landscape than I was expecting this year. And I surely didn't see that the defense was going to make the resurgence this season. With every year over the past few, it's been more about offense, more about quarterbacks, more about scoring, more about, these high flying passing attacks. Well, the defensive coordinators seem to have caught up this year.
Seems to be that way. This has been the Pulse with Hulse as we take I don't know, impromptu, just an immediate reaction. The word is escaping me with Adam Hulse about how the NFL is looking right now. This is not rehearsed. We do it live. Bam. He has no idea what I'm going to ask him. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm going to ask him. I'll take it off what he says. But we had the pulse check. That's actually one of my favorite parts of the show. I have no problem saying that. I really like the Pulse with Hulse. We get into next week's schedule real quick to talk about the plays that you need to make because honestly, some of them are pretty obvious. Fantastic. What one of our favorite times of the year. If you are a football fan, this is one of your favorite times of the year because we got football on Thursday. Now we got football on Friday. We got fantastic college games on Saturday to include the game will be this Saturday at 12 noon. And then we've got more football on Sunday. It's a fantastic week of football, Adam. But I need to know who to put on my fantasy roster. First up, Green Bay at the Detroit Lions. Jordan Love finishing in the top 10 at number 9 last week. Goff does finish it with those 15 points. Their team leads the division by 2 games above the Green Bay Packers. Dylan really leading the team as Jones has been a very big disappointment this year. He's injured, and that's why he keeps trying to force it, and he shouldn't be. Montgomery, a nice surprise. Reed is your leading receiver for Green Bay, where they've got dubs, and we're waiting for Watson to do something. He got his touchdown this week, and of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the elitist wide receivers in the league. That's your first game up. Who are you playing, Adam?
I mean, I love the Lions running backs in this game. When you look at the Packers defense, they are very good against the pass. They are awful against the run. So both Gibbs and Montgomery should both eat this week. Definitely love the 2 running backs. That's pretty much all I really like in this game. I think Luke Musgrave could be, like a cheap, sneaky tight end kind of play. Like I don't dislike that.
Are you playing the quarterbacks in St. Brown though?
I mean, who's not playing St. Brown? Like in like a weekly type of thing. Like he's never going to be on your bench regardless of the matchup. But when I'm looking at like a DFS type of angle, Amon-Ra is not a guy I'm targeting this week because the Packers are very good against wide receivers.
Next up, we got our Cowboys. We got our Cowboys versus the Commanders. I'm actually not mad at it this year. I'm really not. We see this game can go either way every time that they play. We love these divisional matches. And Washington, not great on defense. I expect big numbers out of Prescott, but I expect Washington to be able to play with these guys. Don't get me wrong. Dallas' defense is absolutely ridiculous. And I would not want to play those guys. But Sam Howell keeps making that top 10 list, keeps getting it done, or at least keeping his team competitive all year long. So I think we'll get a game. I still think Dallas comes out on top. The question is, do I play Sam Howell? Do I put Robinson in, who's made the top 10 only 1 week removed from being the top guy? Pollard finally showing up. Will he show up again against this defense? CeeDee Lamb, first, 1 week removed from top 3 weeks in the top 3. What are we getting out of this one, Adam?
I mean, I think Sam Howell is going to be in for a long day against this Cowboys defense in Dallas on Thanksgiving. I think that's a tough spot for him. I mean, look, we've been saying he lives in the top 10 quarterbacks. Maybe he does it again. Maybe he does it in garbage time, right? I mean, the Cowboys could realistically kind of run away with this game. I mentioned before the Commanders have the last ranked passing defense in the NFL. So this is another spot for Dak and CeeDee to kind of go off if that ends up kind of being the game script. I like Pollard again. I mean, he scored the touchdown. By CeeDee Lamb's comments, they are focused on getting him rolling. They want him strong late in the season and heading into the playoffs. So I'm okay with Pollard again. I'm not too interested in playing really many Commanders. I mean, I guess Brian Robinson is fine, especially if Gibson is going to be out again. Yeah. And I mean, especially if Gibson is going to be out again. But if they're playing from behind and Gibson's going to be playing, there's going to be a lot of those passing situations that Gibson might be on the field for. So that's where I would temper my expectations. But I mean, Gibson didn't play last week.
He's got 7.
Yeah, but I mean, right, but Gibson didn't play last week, and that has something to do with it too. The week before, Gibson did play, and Robinson did go off as a receiver, but that's like the first time he's done that in his entire career. So again, I'm tempering my expectations with Robinson as a receiver until I see it happen again with Gibson in the lineup.
There you go. San Francisco at Seattle. Seattle in a must win. I mean, they need to win this game. It's 7-3 San Francisco, 6-4 Seattle. It's in Seattle. Frankly, the 49ers are firing on all cylinders. We know the game. Brock Purdy just came off 333 and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Purdy's going to come into this game with a lot of swagger. You're going to play Purdy. You're, of course, going to play McCaffrey. Like you said, play Ayuk because Seattle's defense is good. They've got a lot of talent, but they haven't really been shutting anybody down. Do you play your Seattle guys? I don't know. Let's ask Adam.
I mean, it's tough to trust your Seattle guys this week. Definitely. I see this as a low scoring type of game, like absolutely for sure. Like you hit it all, like with the Niners, you're obviously playing your Niners. This rivalry is a real rivalry. The
Oh, yes.
Seahawks get up for this game. This is also a primetime game. It's in Seattle. The fans are going to be nuts. It's against their biggest rival. The Seahawks have been reeling a little bit in recent weeks. It would not surprise me if the Seahawks get the victory in this one, in one of those ugly, hard nosed, defensive type of battles that, I mean, let's be honest here, that's Pete Carroll's specialty, right? So I kind of like the upset here with the Seahawks at home. I'm not really excited about a lot of people from a fantasy perspective because, again, I think this is going to be a low scoring grinder.
Zach Charbonnet, again, he's going to be huge on the waiver wire list against San Francisco. I don't know if he's going to pay off this week. San Francisco's rush defense has gotten a little bit softer, but
I
I don't
mean,
know.
yeah, like you definitely have to pick them up off the waiver wire, but there's a lot of other running backs that I'd rather have in my lineup this week than him.
Yeah. In our predictions that we went through every team, every game, where we are sitting over 60% success rate, which is absolutely amazing. We did, in fact, pick Seattle to win this game. So factor that in because that's really the important stat that you need to know when you're talking about this game. Miami at New York. Jets' first ever Friday game. Obviously, the NFL expected Aaron Rodgers to be there when this was going to happen. This is going to be an absolute shellacking. Although, maybe this is a game that Vegas is hoping for. Maybe it's a trap game, but you got Tua, you got Mostert, you got Hill. We saw what Josh Allen did to this Jets defense. I told you the Jets defense is definitely the strong part, but single digits for I think 5 of the last 6 weeks now. I expect the Miami Dolphins, all your Miami Dolphins players to hit them double digits, and Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall. I think Brees Hall's probably low double digits, maybe 10, 11 points. Garrett Wilson, I think he could get up there into your 19s, 18, high teens. But you're going to get the game you expect with this one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually opposite on Garrett Wilson. I want no part of Garrett Wilson this week. He's probably going to be shadowed most of the game
I
by
like Garrett
Jalen
Wilson.
Ramsey, who's been spectacular since he's returned from his
He
injury.
has.
He is shutting down everyone he's covering. And let's not forget, too, it's Tim Boyle who's going to be throwing the ball this week.
Well, that's a good point. That's an
None of us
upgrade, though.
know what kind of quarterback Tim Boyle is, but I mean,
No
I think there's a
film.
reason
We're
why
talking
none of
about
us
no
know what
film.
kind of quarterback Tim Boyle is. So between Boyle being quarterback and Ramsey covering Wilson, for me, I want no part of Garrett Wilson this week. When it comes to the Dolphins, I'm it's really hard to fade a guy like Jalen Waddle. But like, if it's possible, if you have other options, he's not a guy I'm super excited about this week with the Jets passing defense and with Waddle not being great for most of this season anyway. Raheem Mostert is the guy that I love because as good as the Jets defense is, they have not been very good at shutting down running backs. I expect the Dolphins also to be playing ahead for most of the game. I think this is a huge week for Mostert.
That's why we record these things. I actually like Waddle for a touchdown this week. Low double digits in the teens. And you already know how I felt about Garrett Wilson. We'll see. No film. No film on Boyle. Although, like you said, you're playing against Ramsey, and Ramsey probably will be on Wilson this week. So, New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons, a game I don't know, dynasty guys care about. I don't want to spend a lot of time here unless you need to. Kamara's had a decent season, although he hasn't made the top 10 list recently. Olave has had a good season. Drake London has had a good season. But, nobody's putting up big numbers. They're just having good seasons. And that's about all I got to say about this game.
I mean, the only player I want to mention from this game is Rashid Shaheed. Okay, Michael Thomas suffered what's being labeled as a significant injury. He's
That's
probably
always.
not going to play here. He could be done for the season. He could be done for a few weeks. Shaheed is finally going to get his opportunity at an extended look as their wide receiver, too. Let's not forget, he's popped for multiple top 10 finishes this year, but he's also had weeks where he's done absolutely nothing. He's a
Absolutely.
guy that if he's on your waiver wire, he's worth adding this week because he's finally going to get more involvement, or at least in theory, he should be more involved in their offense. So he's definitely a guy I'm watching this week.
There you go. Shaheed, right now, wide receiver 39. He's got 4 double digit games this week. or excuse me, this season. Um, you know, when he, like you said, when he's hot, he's hot. When he's not.
But
But
no
expect
more
a hot,
Thomas. That opens up some targets.
yeah, expect a hot week this week. That's the pulse from Hulse there. Let's go Pittsburgh. They got Cincinnati this week, a Burrow-less Cincinnati. So you're saying there's a chance. No Matt Canada, no Joe Burrow. I'm telling you, there's a chance they can win this one as well and pull this one down. I got nothing to say on Kenny Pickett. I don't know. I want to play anybody in this game with Steelers defense who can be beat. Maybe Mixon's worth a play. It's going to be hard getting the ball to Chase, but if he can get the ball to Chase, I think he'll have his yards after the catch to work with. Cincinnati's defense has actually stepped up a little bit, although you wouldn't have guessed it after last week. And that's about all I got to say about this one. Go Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I have no interest really in anybody from a fantasy perspective from this game. I'm passing on anybody I can pass on. Yeah, I mean, nobody from DFS, nobody I'm excited about. This is going to be an ugly game.
Do you keep Jamar Chase? Or do you drop
Of course.
Yeah. It's
I
hard
mean,
to cut
you have
the tie, right? It's hard to cut that cord and say Jamar Chase, I don't need him anymore. Like he's not going to do anything.
No,
But
you just
honestly,
can't do it. His upside's still way too high that you can't do that with Jamar Chase. I mean, if you want to consider benching him this week, that's also almost impossible to
I like
do.
a trade high
especially
scenario.
a what?
I like a trade high scenario. I'll trade you I would trade you Chase for Keenan Allen. I would make that trade, and the stats
Yeah,
back me up on that.
I don't think anybody's giving you Keenan Allen for Chase at this point. I mean, if you can find that trade, that's a smash spot for sure. But I don't think anybody's doing that right now.
Panthers at the Titans. There you go. I'm done. Play Thielen. That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah. Gross. Pass.
Gross. Absolutely gross. Tampa at Indianapolis. Indianapolis coming back off the bye. You can get some points here. Mayfield is playing decent. Minshew's playing decent. Like these aren't your starters. These are super flex guys, but you're not mad about it. Rashid White's had a good few couple weeks. As long as he keeps catching the ball, Indy's been pretty decent against the pass. I like Mike Evans. Again, he's not going to win your fantasy day, but you can get a nice DFS play and get some numbers out of Mike Evans. There's nobody jumping off the board in this game, I don't think.
No, yeah, let's just remember too that the Bucs are pretty good at stopping the run. So this might not be a huge game for a guy like Taylor, but I do agree with you that in the passing games that there's some value to be had there.
New England and the Giants. Play Barkley. I'm done.
Yeah, play Barkley. That's it. Done.
Yeah, that's it. See, you got nothing. You can't with the New England New York Giants game. Is that possibly the worst possible game you could put together right now? Very possible.
It might be. It matters much more for the draft order than it does anything else. Because these are two teams that are probably looking to draft a quarterback when that draft comes around.
And here we go, the must-watch game of the week. In a 1 o'clock slot, I would have super flexed this to Sunday night, hands down, if I was the NFL. Jacksonville at Houston. This game means everything for one of these teams. Lawrence, Stroud, we're getting the face-off. Clemson versus Ohio State. This is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to hear all week long. Clemson, Ohio State, all over again, especially with the game having happened on Saturday. ETN and Singletary. ETN is 2 weeks removed from the top 10 list, but let's not forget he was like on a 5-game streak before that. Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley showing up. I don't think he'll be the guy. Tank Dell and Nico Collins over there. Singletary, of course, is off the chart. This game, we should really get everything we expect from this game.
I love this matchup so much. I mean, this game is not getting the hype I think that it deserves because it's the Jags and the Texans, right? It's like two teams that aren't like your headline kind of teams. They don't have, the giant
big demographic guys. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you put this exact same situation that these two teams are in and you just change the team names to, let's say, Steelers, Ravens, right? Like if it was something like that, or Cowboys, Eagles, this game would be, like you said, it'd probably be flexed to Sunday night. It'd be the game that everybody would be talking about. Must see, must watch, must tune in. I mean, I'm super excited about it. For a fantasy perspective, I'm super excited about it too. I think that this could be, especially for passing the ball, right? Like I'm big on. I mean, look, this should be another big week for Stroud, for Dell. I'm all in on that. Those are guys I'm looking at for DFS too, right? Like this might be a Stroud stack kind of week in DFS for me as well because the Jaguars' passing defense has not been good at all. Now going the other way, I don't love the Jag side of fantasy as much as I like the Texan side this
Uh-huh.
week, but there's no one, like I'm really fading. Like they're all fine, like they're all pretty, median for what I'd usually expect from them. But I'm high on the Texans fantasy wise this week.
I expect both these quarterbacks to be in the top 10 at the end of the week. I expect both these teams to have receivers in the top 10 this week, and I
Yeah.
expect Singletary to be back as well. Cleveland at Denver. Again, Denver going to get tested this week, and we're going to find out if they are for real, if they, should be the team that everybody says they are becoming or not. They get a little help with Deshaun Watson not being there, although I don't think Deshaun Watson made much of a difference. Fantasy wise, I don't think I'm playing anybody in this game. I know you like the Denver back running room, but which one do you pick to get points? So, I don't like anybody in this game, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a very important game for the AFC playoff picture. For fantasy, I mean, yeah, like you hit it on the head. I really like the Browns running backs. I think either one of them are fine to plug in for weekly lineups. And when you're looking at DFS, I mean, Ford is obviously the
Ford
more
would be a nice value
reliable.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, like Ford's more reliable, while Kareem Hunt, I think, gives you great cheap value for a running back in DFS this week. I think both of them can have good games because the Denver rushing defense has been terrible. Hey, I mean, if you want to go crazy in DFS, play both of them.
Sure. Why not? Get yourself some nice wide receivers who are
Yeah.
by far and away the top scoring guys this year. We got the Rams at the Cardinals. This should be a good one. I mean, honestly, these teams match up well. We got Arizona at home, Murray and company, they're picking it up a little bit. We've got Nakua. It looks like Cooper. I don't know if Cooper Cup's going to be ready for this one or not. He did limp out. I think he will be, but Nakua is still the star, although Atwell's still their top receiver. I'm not touching anybody in the running back room. I would super flex Murray. I could DFS Murray, but I prefer a DFS situation where my quarterback is paired up with somebody, and I don't know that I'm going to pair him up necessarily with anybody in this one. But you could make a case for Hollywood Brown if you wanted to. You really could make a case for that, and you get some good value to spend elsewhere. So I like Nakua Murray. If you pair him up with Brown, I can get on board with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, like dislike that strategy at all. I mean, like you mentioned Cooper Cup. I mean, I'm not so sure he's going to play this week. He's dealing with
Yeah,
an ankle injury. We
which
obviously
is
know
good
he
for
has an
Nakua owners.
extensive. Oh yeah, I mean it's good for Nakua owners for sure, and it also puts Tutu Atwell back on the map, right? Like
Yeah,
if
it does.
Cooper Cup isn't going to play this week, when the first 4 games of this year, when Cooper Cup was out, Tutu Atwell was a legitimate option for lineups, right? Also, keep an eye on that Cooper Cup because if he's out, Tutu Atwell becomes a very good bargain wide receiver for
Mm-hmm.
DFS as well. You can get him pretty cheap, and when you look at his numbers without Cup this year, he produces pretty well. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Absolutely. I was looking for a pin. I need to be writing this down, but luckily it's all recorded, so I can go back and watch it later. Chiefs at Raiders. Chiefs should just absolutely decimate the Raiders, even with the Raiders being at home. They are reeling. And look, you had a lot of drop passes, and Chiefs are going to have to fix that, but they still played a pretty good game. And, they kept it within a score of the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, these are the two best teams in the NFL. So, yes, Kansas City took the loss, but they took the loss against arguably the best team in the NFL. They're still number two. And so, play your Chiefs. Don't play any Chief wide receivers. We've been saying that literally all year, or at least I have. You can make a case if you have to for Rashid Rice. He might be a good DFS value. But other than that, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean the Chiefs for fantasy wise, it's kind of come down to this year. Like you're playing Mahomes, Kelsey, and Pacheco, and like there's nobody else that like. I mean, like you said, Rice, and like he's fine as like a filling guy, but he's never a guy I'm like, eager to get into any lineups, right? Like he's a guy that's fine for lineups, but minus, those three that I mentioned, there's not a whole lot there for the Chiefs fantasy wise. Now the Raiders, let's just remember they played a lot better since firing Josh McDaniels. They've been a lot more competitive and look like they lost to the Dolphins last week, but they didn't look terrible in that loss as well. I think this might surprise some people in that the Raiders might really show up for this game and really, treat this like almost their Super Bowl of this season in a well. I think they're going to keep it more competitive than many might think it will be. But in the end, I mean, the Chiefs are probably going to come out on top.
As you said about the San Francisco Seattle game, the rivalry is real here, and in these
Yeah.
rivalry
Oh, yeah.
games, that's why they play the game.
No doubt.
This next one, Buffalo Bills at Philadelphia Eagles, another one. This is why we played the game. It may or may not shock you to remind you that we picked the Bills to win this game. We said the Eagles were going to be a bit banged up. They were going to be worn out from that Kansas City game. I still hold to that. I think this is the game. This is my upset game of the week. I think Josh Allen, again, he's QB1. He's 2 in rushing touchdowns behind Hurts. Hurts is only a couple interceptions behind him. This is going to be a dogfight. I do think Philly has the better defense, but I believe in what we said before the season that Buffalo could win this game. I think they will, but I don't think anybody should be counting them out. Fantasy-wise, offensively, I'm playing them all. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver number 4. A.J. Brown also in that top 10 list. DeAndre Swift showing up. James Cook showing up, although he is definitely the back I would stay away from. And if I'm staying away from people in this game, I'm playing both quarterbacks. I like this one fantasy-wise, and it should be a fun one to watch, too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with just about everything that you said there. Fantasy wise, definitely targeting, the receivers, obviously the quarterbacks. That's a no brainer for both of these quarterbacks. And look, it's kind of been the theme of this episode with the Bills, right? Like, if good Bills show up against the Eagles, they can very well beat the Eagles.
Yeah.
If bad Bills show up against the Eagles, this game could get ugly the other way.
Real fast.
Now, one thing we have known about Josh Allen, though, right, is that he is clutch. He does show up in the big moments. I mean, go look
100%.
at minus that Bengals game in the playoffs last year, right? Look at all of his other performances in the playoffs. He shows up in the biggest moments, and that's something that he has going for him. Last week, that game against the Jets was basically an elimination game, right? And he showed up and had one of his best games of the seasons. He needs to do it again here against the Eagles that right now, is the consensus best team in the NFL, especially after beating the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. This is a game Allen is going to get up for. I would like to see the Bills win this game. I mean, I'm a Cowboy fan, so I have a little extra motivation to want to see the Bills win this game. But as we know, if Allen shows up and we get good Bills, this could be such a fun, exciting game because we know Hurts and the Eagles, they show up every week. So please, good Bills, show up this week, and this is going to be such an entertaining game.
And after what I see Tony and guys like Justin Watson do last night, I'm happy to play Gabe Davis and Shakir Khalil. 100%. I'm definitely playing those guys as well. So when I say play everybody, I literally mean play everybody in this game.
Well, the Eagles are allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. So definitely play your Bills receivers.
There you go. You just got statted up.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I had to play that because it's a great stat. Thank you. That's almost like a stat of the day. Dan Patrick. Baltimore cannot give up any ground in the North. They are a game ahead of Cleveland. They're 2 games ahead of Pittsburgh. They cannot. They're 3 games ahead of Cincinnati, if you don't want to count them out like most people are. They cannot give up ground, and lucky for them, they're playing up against a team that just can't win if the other team didn't show up. They'd still find a way to lose. They play the Chargers this week. Baltimore versus the Chargers. It is in Los Angeles. Baltimore is playing well. I expect Baltimore to win this game. I like playing. We talked about Chargers will give you fantasy points. They just won't give you a W in the win column. So play your Chargers. Play Keenan Allen, obviously one of the hottest receivers, best receivers in the NFL right now. Gus Edwards is making the top 10 list. He is balling out right now. They are happy to use him because he is getting it done. Lamar Jackson, welcome back to the top 10 list after a couple weeks off. Justin Herbert, always on the top 10 list. I like this game. Eckler's the guy you kind of got to watch out for, but you're not going to not play Eckler, so he's going to be in. The only people I don't like, as I've said all season long, are the Baltimore wide receivers. Judge Jordan and Fantasy Sports Corporation said, name me a wide receiver that Lamar has made look good, and there are none there. So I like Baltimore for the win. I like everybody to get fantasy points except Baltimore receivers.
Yeah, and I mean, for fantasy wise, I think, the Chargers is definitely the easy one, right? Herbert, Eckler, Keenan. I'm playing those three, obviously, because they're never going to be on your bench. There's nobody else on the Chargers that I'm playing this week, especially against that really good Ravens defense. And then for the Ravens, I mean, the Chargers give up a ton of fantasy points, like kind of
Big.
across the board, right? Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned the Ravens receivers, and there's not like any one that I'm like super excited about, but like what I'm keeping my eye on is there's going to be no Mark Andrews this week, right? So there's like a
Andrews
lot
is
of
out.
passing targets
Gone.
for Lamar Jackson to kind of go around. And where are they going to go? Are they going to just go to Isaiah Likely, who has
Gus.
filled in pretty well for Andrews in the past? Are they just going to run the ball more? Or is a guy like, Zay Flowers going to have his kind of breakout, especially with Odell dealing with an injury right now as well and being questionable? So I kind of do like Zay Flowers this week because I think this can be a high-scoring game facing off against the Chargers. He is a guy that I would play this week. I know you wouldn't play. But I do like Zay Flowers. I obviously like Lamar Jackson. The Gus bus keeps rolling. I mean, he scores touchdowns every week. So, like, you got to get Gus in your lineup. And I can tell you exactly what's going to happen in this game. It's going to be a tight game in the fourth quarter. It can go either way, and Lamar Jackson's going to win it because the Chargers don't know how to win those games.
Look, Zay Flowers, I know. I don't like to disagree with Adam Hulse. I really don't. And you got to make your call here. Because Adam makes a fantastic, he talks it up well as everybody does. But look, this is what you cannot deny about Zay Flowers. He has one touchdown on the entire year. That's the only week that he's scored over 13 points out of week one. Week one, he got 18. Week 6, he got his touchdown, so he got 17. Other than that, he hasn't scored more than 13 points. Now, if you're happy with 12, 13 points from your wide receiver, then by all means, go ahead and play Zay Flowers if that's what you're looking for. If you look at your roster and you're like, yeah, 12, 13 points will do me, then I'll get on board with it there. But I will never tell you to play Zay Flowers as Adam will. And let's be fair, Adam is usually right more often than I am, so I will throw that in as well. Monday night, you look at it and say Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings. All right, but sit and marinate on it for a second. All right, you got Fields, you got Dobbs. If you're looking for a Monday Night Miracle and you happen to have players on this team, you darn sure might just get it because Fields is 100% going to get you points. Against the Minnesota Vikings, DJ Moore is probably going to get you some points. You might even get some rushing points out of this one from the Bears side. On the other side, Dobbs is going to get you some points. Hawkinson, I think, is definitely going to get you points in this one. And I think Madison and Chandler both get you some points. Madison probably will get you more points in this one. These aren't the guys that are going to be your top scorers. Other maybe Justin Fields. They're not going to be the top scorers this week, but they can get you that win. They can get you that Monday Night Miracle. I like this game from a fantasy perspective. Not as good as the Buffalo Philly game, but I do like this one to get you over the top in those close games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, this is one of those classic type of matchups that from an NFL perspective is like definitely not looking forward to it from an NFL storyline standpoint.
Sure.
But for fantasy players, this is kind of an enticing matchup. I think there's a lot of fantasy value, kind of like you referenced, that can be had in this game. And that's why the NFL also loves fantasy football, right? Because though you have kind of a lackluster matchup between the Vikings and the Bears in prime time that doesn't really live up to the billing, for the fantasy guys, it doesn't really matter. And from that fantasy angle, like we just said, this is actually one of the better environments per games this week that can really actually generate some high fantasy scores.
It really can. I like the fantasy week this week. I forgot if you guys statted up on wide receivers. Let me run through that real quick. The number one wide receiver did, in fact, make the list because Keenan Allen was wide receiver last week. He comes in at number 6. Again, they're about 50%, 6 times now to 5 not doing that. 24 receivers had a touchdown. Reed was the only wide receiver with a rushing touchdown. He finished at wide receiver 11. Ridley is the only wide receiver with multiple touchdowns, finishing at wide receiver 1 this week. 2 receivers, Tyreek Hill and Allen are the only ones to get double-digit receptions, but 9 receivers, including Tank Dell, had double-digit targets. 7 wide receivers over 100 yards. Ayuk, the only guy over 150. Dell had 149. Hill had 146. They're right there, so close, but Ayuk the only one to get over it. 2 new names to the list. That's Metcalf and Khalil Shakir. Who I said play this week. That's your statted up stats for wide receiver. That is the show for this week. Man, we hit a lot this week, which explains why we are 20 minutes over time. But Adam, as always, I really appreciate you showing up. Appreciate you taking your time to do the show with us every week because honestly, you're awesome. Adam Hulse over there at Sports Talk. Adam, I'll let you say your final words while people take a glance at where to find you.
I mean, it's been an awesome season so far. We're really getting down to that home stretch, right? And we talked about the tight playoff races, a lot to watch with that. You know, there's a lot going on in these last few weeks of the NFL season as we're quickly approaching the fantasy playoffs as well. Yes. So make sure everybody tunes in because there's obviously a lot to talk about with that.
That is what my next comment was going to be, my final comment for the week. The playoffs are right around the corner. If you are close, but not quite there. Some people are in already. Some people are good. Like, that's how it is. Some people are, like, already in. A lot of people are still fighting for it. If you want to finish it out, you got to be right here with us on the effing morning after show. We are here every Tuesday with you at 9:30 a.m. You can call in during the show, which hasn't happened yet. I'd like to see that happen. But you can call in during the show. You can definitely join us in the comments. Thanks to everybody who commented today. You can talk to myself at that Evan Sports Show on Twitter or Instagram. You can talk to Adam over there at Adam Whole Sports. Make sure you go to Sportskeeda to check out all of Adam's great stuff and watch us over on the Fantasy Sports Corporation. So much great content over there. I want to thank TSS Fantasy. I want to thank Toilets to Trophies, one of our new partners this week. Go over there and hit that Gilded app to get all the chat you need from them. Another great show with Adam Hulse. This has been That Morning After Show. Make sure you catch us next week, or I'll stutter less. I'll do that. Come back to see if it actually happens. See, there you go. Next week on That Effing Morning After Show.